This Week in Startups is brought to you by LinkedIn Marketing. To redeem a free $100 LinkedIn ad credit and launch your first campaign, go to linkedin.com/thisweekinstartups. Silicon Valley Bank. For over 35 years, Silicon Valley Bank has helped thousands of tech and life science companies plan for the future. Learn more at svb.com/next. Silicon Valley Bank, built for what's next. And MainStreet. Founders, you're owed over $50,000 by the IRS. MainStreet gets it back for you in 20 minutes. Get back your cash at mainstreet.us/twist.
Hey everybody, welcome to This Week in Startups. I am super pleased to talk to the founder of Running Tide today because I care about climate change like I'm sure all of you do. I believe in climate change and solving that problem as best we can, and that there must be solutions to it. But I'll be honest, I feel like a neophyte. I feel like I don't have the education I need. I trust the scientists. But as an investor and a technologist, I would really love to be able to invest in some companies and some visions and see people take some big swings and some risks and build companies around this. And my friend Chris Sacca, who's a big fan or big friend of the pod, I should say. I assume he's a fan of it, but I know he's a friend of the pod, tweeted out from his @Sacca account recently that Running Tide was the kind of company we're hoping we would find when we started lower carbon. Everybody knows Chris Sacca retired from angel investing. He did well enough with Instagram and Uber and decided, hey, I'm going to just cash in my chips and be done. But then he said, you know what? I want to do a carbon-based venture fund, investment fund. And he says here, bonker scale, unreasonable ambition, massive impact on the planet during insane times. It's entrepreneurs like Marty Odlin that fire us up. And he linked to a story about Running Tide. And I thought, even though it's early days, I would have the founder, Marty Odlin, on the program to talk to us about what he's doing with Running Tide. Welcome to the pod, Marty.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you coming on. Explain to people what Running Tide does and what your vision is.
Running Tide is actually a, we're a full stack aquaculture company. So we're focusing on filter feeders, which would be like oysters, scallops, clams, and kelp. And, another way to think about it is that we're building and managing large-scale living ocean systems.
I love eating 3 or 4 of those things. So big fan of oysters and scallops, not so much the kelp. So
kelp you can do different things with kelp. You don't just have to eat it. But these are all like...
Do people eat kelp? I'm curious.
Yeah, people do. People do. It's actually a big part of... there's this really interesting professor. His name is Michael Crawford out of Imperial College in London. He's done some studies on, what diets basically lead to have best outcomes on longevity. And by and large, they seem to be diets that are rich in DHA and omega-3s. DHA is sheaths the signaling pathways in your brain. And it's the 2 best sources of DHA are oysters and kelp. So if you look at people people in Okinawa have fantastic health outcomes at old age because they're eating so many DHA-rich foods. And
I actually do remember that. I think Malcolm Gladwell in one of his books talked about, I don't know if it was a tipping point or one of them, just the Okinawa, especially I think it was the women in Okinawa living to 100 or something.
Yeah.
So that DHA and kelp is a major way to do it. How does that, I wonder how that becomes, what dishes that's in. Is it in soup? Is it in a pill format? How do people eat it? Like a salad?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, for the most part, it's going to be in soups and salads. I prefer to eat oysters and oysters and shellfish, but the kelp can play a role in diet as well.
So how do those organisms impact carbon?
Well, in a number of different ways. Like for every 100 grams of oysters you eat, you get 12 grams of carbon sequestered in the shell, right? Shells are calcium carbonate. Most of the carbon on Earth is actually locked up in calcium carbonate. So it's a natural part of the carbon cycle. Like the geologic carbon cycle is the carbon sequestered in shells.
Carbon from the air that makes its way into the water is formed into oyster shells.
That's right. That's one pathway. That's like one end result for carbon, like natural process that absorbs carbon from the atmosphere. And then, the other one, like the one that makes oil, kind of, and what you brought me on to talk about was is kelp. So people say that oil is dead dinosaurs, right? But really what it is, for the most part, it's, you look on they're looking for ancient seabeds when they're exploring for oil. And what they're looking for is deposits of dead macro and micro algae. So kelp is a macroalgae that like floats around in the ocean, dies and sinks to the bottom, gets sedimented and becomes fossil fuels at some point in the future.
I didn't know that. So the concept we all have from Jurassic Park and whatever, that dinosaurs equal oil, is actually not correct. I'm sure in part.
In part, it's correct, yeah.
But it's mainly algae and kelp.
Yeah, that's right.
And so what is your company doing with this observation that kelp sequesters carbon?
Well, there's basically 800 gigatons. Well, over the next 10 or 20 years, we're going to have to remove 800 to 1,000 gigatons of carbon from the atmosphere and the oceans. That's basically the excess that we've created in the Industrial Revolution. That's what we put up in the sky. And in order to get back to a steady state, we're going to have to remove it. So that is like, think about it this way. Even if we went to a zero carbon economy where we're not producing any or emitting any excess CO2, we still have that much carbon up in the atmosphere, increasing the amount of energy in the Earth's, increasing the amount of energy in these like super dynamic ecosystems and wreaking havoc. So
we have to take that out.
We have to take it out no matter what. So we have
some
to.
Some of it's in the air, and some of it's already in the oceans.
That's right, and it's a little bit alarming as it'll dissolve into the ocean to reach equilibrium with what's in the atmosphere.
That makes sense.
That's where ocean acidification comes from, right? So it's like excess CO2 in the ocean over steady state, because it's going to try to the ocean's going to try to balance the concentration with the atmosphere. You're going to acidify the ocean. That's absolutely terrifying for everyone on Earth. There's a professor named Ray Hilborn in University of Washington, and he talks a lot about how important just the amount of protein and calories produced by the ocean every year, and if that went away, what would have to do to land use. And essentially, there's not enough land to replace what could be lost in the oceans if the oceans acidify. So it's like,
where are we at in that path to the oceans having a cataclysmic event, and what is the likelihood of that?
It's likely. I mean, it's gonna happen if we don't do something. Like all these problems, they're only going to get worse unless none of this is going to stop unless we make it stop.
Got it.
So, and I've been off and on researching this for, my entire professional career. And basically, I don't think it really, timelines don't really matter at this point, because even 10 years, 15 years ago, the worst case scenarios that people were imagining in terms of sea ice collapse or increasing temperatures, et cetera, we're already seeing worse than worst case scenarios. So there's a bunch of negative feedback loops that are kicking into gear right now, where forests are burning, releasing carbon into the atmosphere, permafrost is melting and releasing methane, et cetera. It's like a lot of bad news. I don't really like to rehash it because...
I think part of confronting it is just part of solving it is confronting it. So in a way, what you're saying is, hey, the global warming that's happening, it melts the ice caps, that creates these heat waves. The heat waves burn all these forest fires in California. That in turn releases more carbons, which starts this, let's call it a death spiral here. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah,
it is a literal death spiral for our planet. And
there's so I mean, if you want to confront it, that's what it is. And I mean, we talk about this is hurting people right now. I mean, this is in my life. I'm from a family of fishermen, and grew up working on the waterfront, and there's been a huge reduction in opportunities for people in my community on what fish are around to catch.
Where were you? Where's your family of fisher?
Portland.
Oh,
in Portland, Maine. Yeah.
And just going out in Portland, Maine, you saw a distinct difference in what you were able to catch. When we get back from this break, I want to talk about what you saw firsthand in that regard when we get back on This Week in Startups. Listen up, everybody. LinkedIn is going to give you $100 in ad credits towards your first LinkedIn campaign. Wait till the end of this ad read and you will get that hundy. Over 78% of B2B marketers rate LinkedIn as the most effective social media platform for reaching objectives. Why? I think you know why. There are 62 million decision makers on LinkedIn, and they mean business. I know this because we market Angel University, Founder University, Remote Demo Day on LinkedIn because we get a great response. Imagine you're about to launch your marketing campaign and it tested well and the team's super happy. Everything is going according to plan, except that one thought in the back of your head. How do I ensure the people I want to target will be in the mindset to receive my message? In other words, are they in a business mindset? And the answer is LinkedIn. When you market on LinkedIn, your message reaches people who are ready to do business. That means your campaign will work as hard as it can as soon as you launch it. LinkedIn equals business, LinkedIn equals business, business equals LinkedIn. You all know it, it's that simple. And LinkedIn can help you with targeting because they do lead generation and brand building. And you can target that audience down to the job title, the company name, and location. So if you're looking for CIOs, CTOs, VPs of sales, you're looking for people in New York, you're looking for people in Miami, wherever you're looking for people, and you're looking for titles, they're going to target and put your marketing message in front of people when they're ready to buy. And you're, of course, going to be in front of the right people with the right titles. Get that $100 right now. I'm really thankful to LinkedIn for doing this. Go to linkedin.com/thisweekinstartups right now to get the hundy. Hurry for your hundy because it may not be there forever. linkedin.com/thisweekinstartups. You got to type in all those letters, and terms and conditions apply. Thanks again to LinkedIn for supporting independent media like This Week in Startups. Okay, let's get back to the show. All right, we're back on This Week in Startups with Marty Odlin. He is on the Twitter, Marty, Odlin, CEO and co-founder of runningtide.com, which my friend Chris Sacca invested in and tweeted about. And I thought, hey, this is a really interesting company in their early days. Hey, when your family was out there fishing, what did you see when you were a kid and versus what you see today? Going out in Portland to go fishing?
I mean, it's like any number of different species have changed their geographic distribution related to ocean warming. So, you can see that the center of biomass of lobsters, for instance, which are the first boats that I worked on. That's like my mom's family's predominantly lobstermen. Some people on my dad's side as well. But the center of biomass is moving north.
So in other words, where lobsters used to be centered, it just keeps moving north because they keep trying to find colder water.
That's exactly right. So like there's places like, Cape Breton Island, which is off the eastern tip of Nova Scotia. And that's just having like phenomenal lobster catches where they didn't really have a lot before. And then you have places like Long Island Sound in New York who had a decent industry and now it's gone.
Wow.
So you can see that moving. There's a collapse of the mackerel fishery, the somewhat modulated but collapse of codfish industry. The northern shrimp we no longer have a season in Maine. There hasn't been a season for 5 years. There probably won't be forever.
Wow.
And so it's just any number of these. And so it's like, it's not, and it's just, there's unequivocal evidence of this at every stage. And like the probability that, climate change is real and climate change is going to like drastically change how we live our lives is like, it's approaching 100%. Like, I mean, some people can find some doubt somewhere, but it's like every single data point is coming
no reasonable person can look at the statistics, can look at the outcomes and say it's not happening. They can only debate what the ultimate impact. What you do about it, and what the ultimate impact will be. Like, and if do you want to kick the can down the road, or as Elon says, running this incredibly dangerous experiment? I mean, I dove the Great Barrier Reef a couple of years ago. It was on my bucket list, and I'm almost reluctant to say how bad it was because I don't want to make the people there feel bad or have a negative impact on the tourism industry. But, you would go down and you would look at the reef and I kid you not, you'd see this incredibly beautiful coral come around a turn and the antlers, this kind of coral that looks like antlers would be white and it would be floating and moving around. And I'd say, wow, what's that? And it was dead. and it was all broken and just floating in the middle of the bottom of the ocean. I mean, it was one of the most disheartening things I've ever seen.
No, it's incalculable loss. Incalculable loss, and could take hundreds of years to reverse. So let's talk a little bit about what does it take to plant kelp? Is this a difficult thing to do, or is it easy? Nothing in the ocean is easy.
Okay, explain. Yeah, educate me.
Well, I've been working around the water for most parts of my life, and it's a really hard place. I know they say space is hard, but the ocean's really hard. It's just giant acid bath that wants to eat everything you put in it. So, I would wager to say that nothing's easy if you're doing it in the ocean. But how the whole process works is you hatch kelp in a hatchery. We built a hatchery that was like one of the first things Running Tide did was we built our own hatchery outside of Portland, Maine. And you basically seed kelp to line. And then what our concept is we'll take it out into the middle of the ocean. We'll deposit it in the ocean, and it'll float along ocean currents until it reaches full maturity. And then we'll have timed plugs in our buoys at floating these little farms. And when the ocean will eat away at it with like a somewhat well-known degradation. And then after a certain period of time, the plug and the buoy will get eaten away. It'll release the air, and the entire works will get sunk to the deep ocean floor.
Wow. So brilliant. You came up with that idea?
Bits and pieces were in my head for a really long time, but I mean, I have to give full credit to my team. We have a phenomenal team of super geniuses. And they're the ones that worked it all the way out. So
just to recap, I'm trying to visualize this.
Yeah.
You are basically making little seedlings of kelp in a hatchery somewhere in Maine. And basically the kelp is on a string of some kind with a buoy at the top.
Yeah.
And a weight at the bottom, I guess, of some type, or
no.
I guess the kelp weighs something. So
the kelp, yeah, that's right.
So at a certain point, maybe it's a year or two.
6 months. 6 to 8 months, yeah.
So 6 to 8 months in the hatchery, then you...
No. It's in the hatchery for 40 days. Put it on a boat.
40 days in the hatchery.
Bring it out to the deployment. Bring it out to the deployment location.
Wow. And
drop it off into an ocean current. Let it go. And it'll just float. And, we've modeled this all out. It'll float out into the deep ocean and sink at a predetermined time. Like that's determined by us.
The buoy itself has some material in it that will break down over time. When it does break down, the weight just sends the kelp to the bottom of the ocean.
That's right. And
after some number of days?
Yeah, it'll be on the order of days. It'll be 6 months plus or minus days. And then
why 6 months? I'm just curious that rather than just drop it to the bottom.
Well, you get maximum growth. So we want, one thing to think about. Well, okay, yeah, I'll just finish describing this and then we talk about
let's describe it because it really is fascinating.
So the idea is that it'll grow for a given amount of time, and when you'll reach like a peak growth where you actually start the fronds of the kelp start to ablade, like so they start to break off. And that's great. It'll still sink to the bottom and be sequestered. But for us, what we're trying to do is create a system where we have like discrete units that we're able to verify how much carbon is contained by them, and then sink that at a given time. So what we want to do is we want to sink complete kind of micro farms with long fronds.
When those are up on the top of the water, are they sequestering more carbon? Is that the idea? Is that the top of the water? Yeah, it sequesters more.
They only work, right? They only work when they have access to sunlight. So you're looking at like the top 30 meters of the water column.
So when they sink to the bottom, do they die when they get there?
Yeah, they die. So think about it this way. What we're doing is it's just a nudge of the natural process. So we're just we're nudging a natural process. Trying to accelerate it to the point where it'll, it can will absorb the excess that we've done. But like one thing to think about is that like the scale that this has to happen at is absolutely tremendous. And I think people the one thing about carbon sequestration that people really need to get their minds around is like how enormous this challenge is.
Okay.
And how much it's going to impact. It's how much it's going to impact all of our lives. And I mean, we're seeing it. If you see like a company like Beyond Meat, like the multiples that Beyond Meat gets are because of its climate story. Right?
You mean the multiple on the value of the company?
Yeah, like consumers are shifting habits. Like a lot of people really care about this, thankfully, and like they're shifting their habits in response to climate change, and it's going to affect everything. This is the thing I
couldn't believe about those impossible foods and all these fake foods or these alternatives was I thought that they were a non-starter because it was so expensive. It turns out consumers are more than willing to pay twice as much for something that's not meat than, or 3 times as much than for something that is meat.
I mean,
they're doing it because they want the world to be better.
Because
they're smart.
Because people are smart and they don't want. I mean, it sounds like silly, but I mean, it's the truth. It's like we have climate change is a monster. It's like it's burning down for like California, right? What is it like? 5% of California is on fire or was on fire this year.
Yeah.
Like, there's towns getting destroyed. There's resources are getting stolen from us. Like this, it's like an enemy that's acting against us, and people want to stop it. So this
is a very bright. This is just a tremendous observation and bright light, I think, in this whole battle, which is the individual consumer actually really cares deeply about this. And they are radically changing personal behavior.
Absolutely.
So the failure of our governments, the failure of our leadership to act in a coordinated fashion is now being challenged by individual behavior. When we get back from this quick break, I want to know how long are these, these kelp things. Yeah. I'm sorry to just keep trying to visualize it. And then how many would we need to do to just sequester the carbon we're using today when we get back on This Week in Startups? This Week in Startups is brought to you by Silicon Valley Bank. What's next? What if? Are we ready? Now what? These are the questions that can keep founders up at night. And no one understands this quite like Silicon Valley Bank. For over 35 years, Silicon Valley Bank has helped thousands of high-growth companies by providing scalable financial solutions along with insights and expertise that many other banks just can't. From healthcare to hardware, software to infrastructure, Silicon Valley Bank works with companies across the innovation landscape at all stages of the journey, anticipating their needs even before they do. And by providing access to insights and in-depth reports, SVB can help you make more informed decisions and assist in turning your great idea into a great business, which could be why 50% of US-based venture-backed tech and life sciences companies bank with SVB. Will your business be next? Learn more at svb.com/next. Silicon Valley Bank, built for what's next. Thanks again to SVB for supporting This Week in Startups. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to an incredibly important episode of This Week in Startups. I want to do my part. I want to start investing in more carbon companies. If you have a company that's doing something to fight global warming, I want to hear about it. I want to get involved. Jason@calacanis.com. Email me. And as part of that today, kicking off, I want to have every company doing something important in climate change on this podcast. We had Zero Mass Water on doing important work in water sustainability. And we're going to just keep pulling this thread and figure out what great entrepreneurs are trying to solve the problem. We're going to give them a ton of exposure. And today, Marty Odlin is on the pod talking about Running Tide. So how long is this kelp sheath or a tree stalk that you're building? How long do they get?
30 meters.
30 meters, that's about 100 feet.
100 feet. You got it.
Wow. So it's a third of a football field. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're tall, but they're not big, right? What we're talking about, we call them micro farms, and we make them as small as makes sense. Because, that way we're trying to spread them out as much as we possibly can. What you don't want to do what causes people problems in the past in these types of industries is where you try to concentrate everything together. It's just like thermodynamics tells you it takes less energy to go like this with stuff than it does to make things come together. So trying to spread things out as much as possible, keep things at low density.
Let me ask this, and it maybe take a minute for you to do the math. As a consumer, let's say I drove a car every day, like a Prius or something. So I burned a little bit of fossil fuel, and I lived in an apartment. I burned a little bit of, oil, as it were. An average American, how many of these stalks would I, as an average American, need to put in the ocean to just be carbon neutral? Would I need to put 100 stalks, one stalk?
Okay, great question. Let me work it out really quick. Jeez, this is actually my nightmare when I was talking about coming on this.
Coming on the pod is actually doing real-time math. I really shouldn't ask it this way. It was kind of a jerk way to say it. But another way to say it is, how many stalks would it take for the entire planet to be carbon
I'll tell you
neutral?
that. I have that figured out.
Tell me that one.
Okay, well, this is interesting. The average carbon footprint for someone in the U.S. is 16 tons.
16 tons. Wow.
Yeah, and the global average is 4 tons. So we're 4x worse than the average.
Okay, so if we went to 8 tons as a global, if we, or whatever.
I know exactly how many buoys it would take to get to 40 gigatons.
Okay.
So that's 400 billion.
Okay.
So that's a lot. That's a lot. Huge amount of effort. But it's possible. But it's possible. And the ocean can absorb it. This is the most important thing, right? There are only so many places that you can take this carbon that's in the atmosphere and put it where it's out of the carbon cycle. So you can plant it into trees, you can put it into soil. Those are like somewhat temporary solutions because they're still in the carbon cycle where people could go cut down the trees or burn down the forests or like overtill the land and release the carbon. So those are great. We need to do those as fast as possible.
We need to plant trees.
Yeah, we need to do all of that. But then there's also this other type of carbon sequestration, which you call like permanent removal from the carbon cycle. And that's critical because that's what we have to do to get back into balance. And so we need permanent removal. So, you can divide up the climate work into like 3 parts. You have behavioral change, so we release less carbon.
Right.
Eat oysters. They're really good for you. Low carbon footprint, fantastic thing to do. It offsets potentially, more carbon intensive protein sources that you could be eating. Right. So those things are important to do.
And you said scallops too?
And scallops as well. Yeah, absolutely.
I love
those.
Those
are all
too.
super important things to do. And we need to do those. Then the other bucket is like pulling climate down or pulling carbon down out of the atmosphere. And then you put it in, and you want to do it into permanent places. So permanent places would be turn it into rock or like calcium carbonate, where it's going to be super stable and it's not like take a ton of energy to get it out. So it's unlikely people would do that in the future. Then you have, you could turn it back into oil or like a gas and inject it deep underground. So there's some really interesting companies like Charm Industrial that are doing that. And then finally, you could sink it to the bottom of the deep sea, which we're doing. So
and it doesn't harm the ocean to put that carbon down there.
No, I mean it's a natural process. And no, like once the carbon gets down there, it's down. And when you talk about harm, like one of the things we have to be like super disciplined about is like we have to acknowledge that like no matter what level of effort we do into reversing climate change, there will be externalities. But what's the option? What's the option? We let the ocean acidify and die? Like that's insane. Like
that's completely not an option.
Yeah, right.
So, 400 billion to sequester everything in there, or just to be neutral for the year?
That's neutral for the year. So you have to do that, plus you have to decarbonize. And if we decarbonize and do that, then it would take us 20 years to get it all down. I mean, it's like conservatively, it's going to be, and this is like a huge number, but it's like people talk about like $40 trillion to get the carbon out of the atmosphere down. And
doesn't actually seem like an impossible number. I'll be totally honest. Seems possible.
It's possible. It is possible. The technologies are not fully baked. But no one has this fully baked. Nobody has this dial. Nobody's like, hey, you give me $40 trillion. This is done. You know what I mean? Like we're not there yet, but we need to get there really, really fast.
So what would it take? What is the cost of today to drop a stock? Is it $100? Is it $1,000?
Yeah, I mean, it's on the order of, it's on the order of like $150 to $200. Per stock. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was talking per ton.
But per ton is interesting too to look at.
Yeah, I mean, let's do it per ton because then it's apple to apples when you have other people on board, right? So, yeah, we're looking like $150 to $200 a ton. We think like as we scale, you get some economies of scale. We get better at this. We're better at our selection of species, et cetera. We get better at our deployment locations. We refine our models, and you know, I think it's totally reasonable for us to get under $50 a ton. I think $50 a ton.
How many tons did an average American use? Did you say before?
16.
Okay, so
it's not a crazy amount. I mean,
so if I spend $2,000, if I gave you $2,000, I could be carbon neutral with this.
I don't know your lifestyle, but yeah.
Yeah, actually, probably got to give you 4K. Yeah. I'm not flying on private jets, but my house is big.
Yeah, totally. So I mean,
I do drive Teslas, but you know.
Yeah, that helps. That helps. I'm not making any judgments, but yeah, I mean, you have to be careful.
No, I think we do need to make judgments. I think everybody needs to be judged on this now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it depends on what you eat. You should.
Yeah, that's a bit of a challenge for me.
Eat a lot of shellfish and
in robots and automation, I would think if we really took this seriously, building or taking an old oil rig or an old platform that's already in the ocean and having robots build and do this work and just throw it overboard.
Yeah,
I wonder if that would work too. Or barges doing this on bar. Could you take an old oil tanker and make that into a greenhouse to build this stuff so it's just permanently out there? Oh, okay. Sorry. Is that the roadmap?
No. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to scale this type of effort. I mean, what we're doing, I don't want to there's a lot of sophisticated modeling that's going into this in terms of deploying in certain locations that are able to have the correct nutrients, and the biogeochemistry of the ocean bottom where you deploy is very important. So there's a lot of there's a lot of ocean knowledge and ocean data that gets crunched in order to make something like this viable. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways that we can scale this up, and I think that we have to. And one way, 400 billion is not an insane number. It isn't, because think how many coffee cups get made, or think how many trivial things that get made that aren't necessarily gonna for lack of to not be too overdramatic, but you could potentially have a huge impact on the future of civilization. Elon Musk says all the time, right? Doesn't he say climate change is one of the filters? It's one of the great filters. If a civilization can't get control over its atmosphere and the concentration of gases in its atmosphere, then it doesn't pass the great filter.
Yeah, and what we mean by great filter in this sense is the filter of, does your species make it to the next level? Right. One of them is can you not kill each other with war? There's one filter. Can you build a society where warring factions don't destroy each other? Nuclear weapons. That's one. Fusion, nuclear weapons, whatever. I guess, being able to contain pandemics like we're in the middle of right now is another one. When we get back from this final break, I want to understand where you will place these deposit sites. And I'm just curious because I remember reading that, if I'm correct, the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest part of the ocean, I think, was considered as even a nuclear waste disposal site. So I'm wondering if that plays into this when we get back on This Week in Startups. If you're a founder, the IRS owes you some serious cash. That's right. But the only thing stopping you from claiming your cash is the single most detrimental thing to business productivity: paperwork. You don't want to do paperwork. That's where MainStreet comes in. They are experts at getting you the biggest possible slice of the billions the IRS sets aside each year to encourage and support startups. It only takes 20 minutes. They grab all the data directly from your payroll system, and they save startups an average of $51,000 in just the first month. Plus, they'll keep fighting for you after you onboard, qualifying you against hundreds of tax credits every month for free. MainStreet only gets paid when you do. Sandbox VR, we know that company very well. They got back $82,000. Italic got back $124,000. And Lofty AI started using MainStreet just 3 months ago, and they've been getting $3,200 back per month. It really is that simple. Onboard, wait, and get cash. Sometimes things that sound too good to be true can still be good, and also true. They're trusted and backed by the best in Silicon Valley: Product Hunt's Ryan Hoover, Shrug Capital, Gradient, Ron Conway's fund, SV Angel. They're the real deal, and they will help you get those tax credits. Twist listeners get 25% off their fees for life. Just visit mainstreet.us/twist. 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 More details and a priority onboarding call with MainStreet's team members are waiting for you at mainstreet.us/twist. Hey, welcome back to an important episode of This Week in Startups. One which I want to make a big focus of this podcast in 2021. You as a fan of the podcast can help by emailing myself and Nick at launch and .co and Jason at calacanis.com. You can email me and say, hey, here's an important topic for you to cover. If you're a PR person, there's no need to email us or a marketing person because you will not get your client on the podcast. If you do email us, we will put them on the penalty box and not put them on the pod for at least a year. So don't email us suggestions if you're a PR firm. We take offense. Unless it's Masayoshi-san, in which case the PR person should email us because I'd love to interview Masayoshi-san. But in all seriousness, the fans drive who's on the pod, as do our co-investors that we invest in at launch. And one of those is Chris Saka, longtime part of the This Week in Startups family and a friend of the pod. So Running Tide is our amazing guest today, Marty Odlin. And I'm curious, is the Mariana Trench a great place to put carbon sequestering because it's so far down? Or would this stuff even make it all the way down? I wonder.
No, I don't know. We've never modeled it out that deep.
Never been to the Mariana Trench?
No, I've never been.
Talk to Jim Cameron. I think he's the only person who's really been there.
Yeah, I'm sure he has some stories about it too. But I think that depth is critical. You want to be deep enough that the physics come in your favor and sort of like compressibility of the gases, and you don't want carbon or methane to be like coming back up. But there's a little bit more to it than that, where we also want to make sure that we're, at least in our model, we think that the best way to do this is to spread it out over a large area that has the appropriate biogeochemistry to like kind of encourage the formation of kind of like deep carbon deposits. So there's some specificity to where you put them, at least in the model that we're trying to kind of
Would
using.
Creating oyster farms also help with the sequestering problem?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's like,
is that on your plan too?
Every day. No. That's actually how we started. We're like predominantly a shellfish company, and then this kelp was always on the roadmap, but we started to pull it forward as we saw the market start to develop, where there's all these companies. So actually, what we started with is figuring out ways that we could harvest shellfish and using sensors. Like using sensors and data systems and robotics to harvest shellfish in the most efficient way possible and develop the highest quality product. The goal is to refine all of these systems so that they're scalable, and we're able to meet the enormity of the demand coming, right? How
do you fund the kelp farming and this distribution of kelp? Is this something you think governments will pay for, or you'll get carbon credits for this and then be able to sell them to the car companies who won't make EVs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a bunch of different mechanisms right now. We're operating in a voluntary market where like most of these super, the progressive companies with a lot of cash are making commitments in response to consumers, and their own ethical, in the ethical guidelines of the CEOs or whatever, or management teams, but they're making commitments to be zero carbon. And, a lot of that is like buying renewable energy and like establishing renewable energy for their facilities. But a lot of it is going to have to come through negative emissions. So
somebody like Apple or Google, who've made Amazon, who've made these commitments publicly to be carbon neutral by 2030, they're not going to get there just with solar panels. Yeah, they're going to need to give money to you. They're going to need to give you $50 million a year, $100 million a year to go ship some kelp out there and sequester some carbon.
That's right, and that's like a first. That's great that these voluntary markets exist. I'm super happy that there's that level of interest out there, and I think that as time goes on, when you look at the level of effort required, this is going to look a lot more like a world war on carbon. And so, and it's going to be, it's going to require, I think it's going to require governments to step in and to, accelerate these efforts, so that we can, to do permanent carbon removal at scale. It will probably require government intervention.
I'm curious, and not to make this political, but just on a factual basis.
Yeah.
What trajectory were we on under the previous 8 years of the Obama administration in terms of if you were to rate them, either a letter grade or a scale of 1 to 10 on their focus on climate or carbon, and then this current one? And do you feel this current administration, have they set us back, or is there in a way some perverse way in which their just absolute, ignorant, denial of this has inspired your generation, millennial, I believe you're a millennial, but I'm not certain of that. But millennial generation, Generation Z seem to look at this as a key component of their operating system going forward. Like every young person I meet, for them, prior to Gen X, that climate change is just top of mind. Absolutely, they would care more about the climate than their own personal careers, let's say.
Absolutely. Who doesn't? You'd have to.
Well, I don't think boomers do. Literally, okay. I think boomers don't. Fair enough. And I think that's fair part enough. Of the. And I think Gen Xers are kind of 80% in, 20% maybe denying.
Okay. Well, look. Yeah. Well, one, anybody that wants to do a lot of really hard work, and doesn't come. Give me a shout and we'll get to work. Yeah. I got plenty of work for people to do. You're asking me to do math and you're asking me to talk politics. It was really
well, but just in terms of politics, I'm just curious.
Look, like it's not like I'm going to be real. It's not like they were barely anybody's addressing this except these like super forward-leaning tech companies at this point. Like that's
interesting.
That's the reality. Like okay, you signed the Paris Accords, great. Like, what are you going to do about it? Right?
Paris Accords seem to be all opt-in, right? Like we're all going to try our best, but it didn't seem like it actually had goals on it.
The forests are on fire right now. The fish are swimming away right now, and that's with the carbon that's already that's already up in the atmosphere. So, what are we going to do about it? Like, that's what it comes down to. It's like, and why in 2020 are companies like Running Tide or Charm or whoever just getting into this? Like why hasn't the time to, it's like, it's a Chinese proverb. When was the best time to plant a tree? It was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So yeah. I'm glad we're doing it, but like I don't think anyone's off the hook on this. I don't think that's the right way to approach it. I think we just have to be like, look, this is real. This is happening right now. And we have to get after it.
And do you feel like the investment community sees this like Chris Sacca? Do you see a change? Because you've been at this for a couple of years. I think the company started in 2017. Have you seen any change in the last 3 or 4 years? And I know you went to Columbia's Center for Sustainable Energy, or engineering rather, back in 2009. So maybe it's just over the last decade, what have you seen in terms of the finance communities and the entrepreneurial communities embracing of this as an opportunity, as a business opportunity?
Yeah, I think that on the consumer side, like on the demand side, I think that it's really that I think people believe in this. Like there's a lot of support for people to be like, okay, let's get super healthy, low carbon proteins. Like let's figure out how to do that. And I think that there's a lot of investment in that space, and I think that's really exciting. And like we're a beneficiary of that, a little bit more on the natural food side than some of the other cultured meats. But like, I think that helped us get off the ground. When you want to talk about like direct carbon sequestration, I don't think that's really kicked off. But where it needs to be, I think that, I think it's as important as anything, short of like, stopping nuclear weapon proliferation. I think that pulling carbon out of the sky is one of the most important things we can be doing. So like, the question is, what role does capital have to play in that? I think it's a pretty important role. So
yeah, and just in terms of humans' belief in climate change, the share of humans saying they think climate change who believe the climate is changing and human activity is mainly responsible. 71% of people in India believe this. 69% of people in Spain believe this. Great Britain, it falls to 51%. And then when you get to the United States, only 38%, this is in 2019, 38% of people believe that. Saudi Arabia and Norway, 35%.
I bet it's way higher. I bet it's way higher this year than last year.
I have a feeling where like, it's really interesting. It's like, we are such schmucks that scientists show us this, and we need to have 10 or 20 smoke days in the Bay Area for the world to actually believe it.
Right.
It is a really bad aspect of human nature that we have to see things firsthand to believe them sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean it's a shame. I think a lot of it is comes from people not seeing available solutions and not seeing like a. And I think that now that there's starting to be solutions out there, whether it's food, which I think is super critical. If it's, electric cars are starting, you start to see them every day now instead of one, or at least, once a week. And I think that when you see an electric car, you don't take out your camera and take a picture of it because it's so unique. I mean, when I had literally the 16th Tesla ever made, the Roadster, I had serial number 16, and cool. I could not drive the thing in Santa Monica without, I kid you not, people opening the door and asking to take a ride. I literally would have people open the door out of valet and say, "Can I get in? I want to just sit in it." I haven't driven in a Roadster. I'd love to, even today.
It's in my garage.
I think I'm on the wrong side of the country, but yeah, it's so cool. So there's availability of solutions now. So I think that as more solutions pop up, I think people are going to start to amazingly start to believe that we can do this, right? So I think that, when it's hopeless.
You're hopeful.
Yeah.
You would have to be to go to work every day.
Yeah. I mean, I wake up every day. I get up really early and I'm fired up. I mean, I have an amazing team of people. They all believe in the mission. They're trying to grow the healthiest, lowest carbon footprint food possible. We're trying to remove carbon from the sky and the ocean. That gets people fired up. So I have no problem going to work every day. I just hope we just need more of this effort, and it just needs to accelerate. People need to be, lean into it harder. So yeah, I think I am hopeful. I am hopeful because I don't think we're going to do it. I guarantee we do it. I think humanity's going to do it. It's just a matter of how much pain we go through before we get after it, before we're really engaged, because are we going to wait for a super hurricane to wipe out, the Gulf Coast? Are we going to wait for that? Or are we going to wait for, instead of 5% of California burning, 15% of California burning? At some point, it's going to be too much, right? At some point, we're going to stop and say, we need to solve this problem. Let's put our best minds, our best capital, our best money, and, make a national effort at this. So I think that it's going to get solved. It's just a matter of what we have to go through to get there.
Do you feel what we saw during the pandemic in terms of, and it was a weird kind of observation that nobody expected, but when everybody had to shelter in place, we got to see what a world with, almost, I don't know if it was 80 or 90% less oil being burned in cities, what that was like when all the cars were off the road.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, people were seeing the Himalayas from,
how cool
around places they had never seen them, but they were there. They just couldn't see them in India or wherever it was. And then people couldn't see, even in the Bay Area, it was a very weird experience for me to look out on the sky in the Bay Area and say, wow, you can see more stars, the air is cleaner before the fires. During the pandemic in the spring, it was like, wow, the air is noticeably cleaner.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with you that the pandemic caused a pause and maybe caused people to take a look around them, slow down a little bit, take a look around, look at their natural environment, look at the built environment, and change slightly their relations to it. And I think that's really important because, one of the things we talk about a lot at Running Tide is we try to talk about okay, listen to the ocean, look at the data, do the math, listen to the ocean. It's going to, that's going to tell you everything you need to know. And I think that when people, and then we do that, and then all these opportunities open up. You just look, like the ocean is this huge, super powerful thing. We need exponential functions to change the world, and the ocean can like absorb and power those exponential functions, whether it's food or climate or whatever. And I think that when people take a pause and like look around at their natural environment and start to listen, like you can actually, there's not to sound too out there, but there's a lot to learn by doing that. And I think that the pandemic gave people that pause.
It's going to take a long time to get solar panels out there. Obviously, putting them on every building, it takes time. We're getting there. But nuclear, we haven't invested in here in the United States in a long time. We haven't had a new nuclear reactor since the early 70s. France is primarily powered by nuclear. Japan stopped nuclear after Fukushima, and Germany, in a very reactionary way, shut down their nuclear reactors, although they've had days where they've had 50% of their energy provided by renewables, so they could afford to do that because of their investment. But putting all that together, would it not make sense, and I'm wondering if you would be in favor of a really urgent deployment of hundreds or dozens of nuclear reactors so that we stop burning fossil fuels in the United States and other places? What's your position on, and especially for India and China as well, because China is making dozens of them. They're doing it. So what's your position on nuclear as a bridge to get us off of fossil fuel? Curious.
It's not something that I've done a ton of research on, so I don't want to like prognosticate, but I do think that it's nuclear gives us the opportunity to do direct air capture in a responsible way. Like direct air capture is like these giant fans or whatever that suck CO2 out of the atmosphere and inject it deep underground or turn it into bricks. And it's a really interesting technology. And if it runs off, but
what was the name of that technology?
Yeah. So there's different types of carbon capture, right? There's DAX, which is like direct air capture. There's BECCS, which is like bioenergy. So like burning biomass and then taking the leftover carbon and burying that. There's like what I call direct ocean capture, like what we're doing. So there's a variety of different carbon capture mechanisms. Now, the careful thing, the thing we have to be careful about is like this concept of additionality. So even if you're putting solar panels out and using that to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, you have to compare that to just using the solar panels to prevent carbon from going up in the first place, right? So if you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, if you're pulling off the renewable energy grid in order to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, you have to do the analysis of like, is the carbon I'm emitting from like the natural gas plant to replace the energy that's coming out of the renewable grid, does that balance how much carbon I'm pulling down? So it gets really complicated, and that's why like ultimately it's going to require some sort of governance that's going to wrap all this up and like make sure all these things are balanced. Because if we do it in an ad hoc way, I really worry that we're going to lose some of the higher quality carbon sequestration techniques will be given short shrift.
In relation to nuclear, if we were to create, let's say in the United States, some of these small nuclear reactors are now much safer. If we were to create 100 of them and we could get over the NIMBYism of where to put them for a second, which I think if you told people in California right now, we can start reversing climate change if you approve some nuclear reactors, people in California who are dealing with the smoke issue would be like, yes, let's do it. Right. Much rather have a couple of nuclear reactors and deal with that risk. And the new nuclear is so much safer than Fukushima, which was a disaster. They knew where they put it was below sea level, and they took that risk anyway. And they kept that risk for 30 years. It was just really dumb. No offense.
Yeah, I mean, I've read a bit about like how some of them now they fail safe, like they're fail safe. So if any system fails, it shuts down.
Yes.
I think it would be... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I just wanted to know how you direct air capture related to nuclear. You're saying the nuclear reactor is there, and so it's throwing off so much energy, you could actually have DAC going on when it's got excess energy?
I mean, like I'll be honest, like I've done a lot of modeling and thinking about how to use the ocean, right, for different things. Like that's kind of where my focus is. I feel like that's where I bring like some sort of like a unique skill set. When it gets to that, I just don't understand the risk curve. So like, I don't want to tell you that I think that's like a fantastic idea. I think that from like first principles, that makes a lot of sense, but I don't have the information to be able to like balance out the risks of this, of nuclear energy. I think that people are probably not looking at the risks when they're against it, right? I bet that people aren't really digging in on all the risks associated with it. And I definitely think that the status quo, or like doing nothing about carbon in the atmosphere, is like completely unacceptable and will be looked on as foolish.
If we start,
so like, what do we have to do? What tools do we have? That's a tool, right? Let's assess it.
If through sequestration and through conservation, not putting more carbon in, and just if we start going in a negative amount of carbon in the atmosphere, you said it might take 20 years or 30 years to sort of get that out at a major cost. So let's say that we start trending in that way. What would we see happen? Would we see the climate? Would we see the temperature go down again and not have these crazy heat waves and not have these dust bowls? And would we see that, or would it take time for that to occur? I'm curious. Or do we not know?
Well, okay. I don't know if the models are sophisticated enough to really see that. I mean, the models have all been wrong, and everything's worse than they thought it was going to be. So let's be careful. But remember, like, what happens in spring or summertime, or spring or fall, when the sun starts to go down, right? Like June 21st, when the sun starts to go down, it still keeps getting warmer, right? So it's going to, even if we started to bring carbon down from the level that it's at today, and we started to bring it down, it's still going to keep getting warmer. It's still going to keep getting warmer. The rate of acceleration will probably slow, but we're still going to see it get warmer. So no matter what we do, it's going to get warmer for a while. And that's what's terrifying. And they talk a lot about like, oh, we can accept like a 1.5 degree C increase. And that's kind of like where people have already baked that in. Like, that's the best we're going to be able to do. That's terrifying, because if it gets warmer than it is now by 1.5 degrees, like, things are not looking great right now. So I think like I understand that there had to be some acceptance of some level of rise, but it's also like, you kind of wish someone would step up and just be like, one of these leaders and politicians would step up and just be like, no, like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
What does it take to stop and like bring it right down as fast as possible? And I think that would be like, but I think consumers are doing that. I think that consumers are driving it. I think that's why, you can see it in food, because that's where people consume every day, and they're able to make changes in their life. They can make these changes with food. People don't necessarily have the power to change the energy grid, right? Like, they don't like, any individual doesn't have enough power to do that. But like with food, you can, and you see it every day. And like, you see it with, I see like, there's, the rise of pescatarianism, veganism, vegetarianism. It's all a response to climate. It's what people have power over. So I see leadership coming from just the mass. We just haven't had that transformational leader to step up. And
I think this is generational. I'll be totally honest. I think these boomers who are thinking about their 401ks more than they're thinking about the environment and sustainability, they're we got 70 some odd year olds, running for president. I think that their time is a decade away from being over. And then you start having, the oldest members of Gen X starting to take positions of power, and they've got Gen Z kids, millennial kids. It's just kind of hard for them to sit and have a conversation with their own kids about what they're not doing. Whereas boomers can kind of talk to Gen Xers and, hey, there's reasons we're not doing it. I think it's becoming unsustainable for those leaders to take this position. And Gen Xers just are cut from a different cloth than the millennials. When they get in office, the AOCs of the world, like, this is their number one issue, right?
I mean, it's how can you? I mean, it's climate change is going to take. Like, I'm kind of, I live in Maine. I like
How
being
old
out.
Are you? I'm curious.
I'm 38.
Yeah, so I mean,
I live in Maine. I like to be outdoors. I like to surf and fish, and like, that's all the good stuff for me is provided by free from nature. Like, that's what I like. I just like to be out there, and climate change is taking all that, and it's making it so. And it's gonna make it so I can't fish in these old fishing spots, and I can't. The surf breaks are they even gonna exist? They're gonna get eroded away and like move like. Wherever. So like, I'm looking at my kid's life and I think of the life I lived, and it's just like, it doesn't line up. I'm not going to be able to pass all these traditions or all these things down to my kids. And that's like something that's super concerning.
Yeah. The most disturbing moment I had in this whole discussion was 2 times when I was in Japan for my book tour. 2 different really educated people said they asked them if they had kids. They said, no, it's immoral to bring kids into this world. And I was like, well, kind of brought 3 into the world already. Thanks for telling me now. But they literally felt it was immoral because of global warming, because of the environmental collapse. Like, why would you bring a child into this? Which is, I mean, that to me was just heartbreaking.
Like, it is. It's hard. I mean, that just
soul crushing, right?
Yeah. Now I just want to get back to work right now.
Exactly.
Like,
I mean, there's literally people who believe that the human species needs to be half the footprint it is. I mean, that's in a way what nature is telling us is, maybe you guys overplayed your hands and maybe there should be half as many humans. Maybe we'll just burn all your houses. And I mean, maybe that's what Gaia and Mother Earth is telling everybody. Like, if you don't fix this, we're going to fix you. Right? I mean, it's kind of the message. What makes you hopeful? Because I know that you have a lot of contemporaries in the field. When you see we'll end on this, is when you see other projects going on, which other projects inspire you and make you hopeful that are going on in there? Obviously, foods.
I think, I mean, food, I think is number one in my mind. I see a lot of people, changing how they eat and focusing on where it comes from and how clean it is, how well it suits their body, the carbon footprint, et cetera. I love everything I'm seeing in food. And that, like, I think obviously Elon Musk and Tesla, like, I mean, how can you not? This guy's thinking like absolutely from first principles and building huge.
Yeah, trust me, there's a whole cabal of people who are shorting the stock, who are rooting against it, which is literally a direct line for rooting against the planet. It's crazy.
I know, it's insane. But
who are these people? I mean, how do you wake up in the morning? Just to pause on this for a second, Marty. Yes. Can you imagine being so cynical? You wake up in the morning and say, you know what stock I want to short? The one that's trying to save the goddamn planet and get us off fossil fuel.
I don't know. I don't have it in me, so I can't even. I honestly don't understand it. It's like.
I mean, literally, those people should just go buy a car, go buy an EV. Like, that's what they should do.
Yeah.
Like, they should be rooting for him to invest another 10 billion or 20 billion in making factories.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think, project wise, I think. This Charm Industrial, I think what they're doing, I mean, I've never talked to them, but I think what they're doing is beautiful. I think like Shopify, who gave us some support, I think I'm so inspired. I'm so happy that they're out there pushing the envelope and looking for these emerging like direct or like carbon capture programs. Stripe is doing that as well. Amazon, Microsoft, there's a bunch of companies that I think are
so to
really
be clear,
leaning into this.
As much as tech has been maligned for being so successful, what you see is very conscientious capitalism as far as those companies are when it comes to climate. Man, they are actually leading. They're the tip of the spear for the climate revolution, aren't they?
I was outside of the tech world. I'm not like an insider at all. Like I knew one person in venture capital when I started on the Running Tide journey, and like I had one introduction. Like and I've built all of that network's built over the past few years. You heard a lot of bad stuff about it. Like before I got into it, I listened to a lot of podcasts, but you read a lot of criticism. But once I got into it, and every single person, or like by and large, almost everybody I've talked to, all my investors, they're all just like amazing people, super forward thinking, trying to make the world a better place. Like, and then when I've had contacts with these larger companies, like the people from Shopify, they've been brilliant and beautiful people. Like
Toby's a great human. He's trying to pod.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. They're trying to do the best they can. And I appreciate it. And I haven't seen anything bad come of it. Like, obviously I'm not going to like I'm sure there's a lot of downsides. I'm not saying this isn't like a whitewash of anything that could be happening, but yeah, I'm happy that they're doing the right thing on climate. That's all. I don't care about.
Yeah. But I do think it's a great pause, which is, it's very easy to malign the secondary impacts of a lot of these tech companies, whether it was Amazon or Facebook. Obviously, when you build these very large at-scale companies, they can have problems. But when it comes to climate change, to be clear, the leadership on climate change coming out of the tech industry is second to nobody. I mean, and the investment is second to nobody. You got to give people credit for doing good things.
Yeah. And I mean, like
Bezos is giving $10 billion to climate change.
Good. We need it.
I don't know if he's given you any yet. but
that doesn't matter.
Right, well, listen, he listens to the pod, Jeff. Jeff at Amazon.com. Somebody email him right now. Send him a link to this episode and this timestamp. You guys have his email, Jeff at Amazon.com. Go ahead and email him and say, listen to this part. J-Cal blew you up. You got 10 billion you're given. I'm going to say right now, give Marty 100 million. There's a 50-50 that he's going to get the message, and there's probably a 10% chance he'll send you 100 million. Because you're doing it. You're doing it. It's legitimized and it's working. Yeah. So you're hiring now. I know that.
Yeah.
Tell us what positions you're hiring for. Where would these people work? And let's get you to fill those positions. What positions are you filling?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can people go to see the job postings? And obviously your first name at your company name. But
yeah. So
what are you looking for?
I'm looking for engineer. Filled. Yeah, I'm looking for engineers across the board. Mechanical, material science. Electrical and software. So looking for all of them. We're looking for a director of biology.
Director of biology. There you go.
That's a good role.
Where would they have worked previously?
I'm pretty open-minded. Like there's going to be whoever we bring in, I want to be comfortable with running a lot of experiments at the same time.
Okay. So you got to be bold, experimental, detail-oriented.
We iterate super fast. We build super fast. I'm not
embrace change, experimentation. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And the team, my team is absolutely incredible. I have some of the best people you could ever imagine. They work incredibly hard. And it's very clear to me, we build as much in 6 months as most people build in years, in 3 years, 4 years. At another job, we just work really quickly and iterate as fast as we can, gather as much data. So, the engineers, biologists, I'm very keen to get as many people, as many high-level people as we can, but also there's a lot of opportunities in the entry-level space for us as well, because there's just awesome. a lot of work to do.
So if you're an engineer or you're in in biology,
that's right.
They got some opportunities here, and you guys, the office is in Maine, yeah.
The office, yeah, we have an office in Portland, Maine,
nice.
And beautiful.
Some
place.
Nice living out there. Some nice living out there. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on the pod. I know that you're not necessarily going on tons of pods, and I really appreciate the work you're doing. Sincerely, just from one human to another, one founder to another. I really appreciate you and what you're doing, and I wish you great success with it. And if anybody's listening to me, if you're really smart and you're considering taking that max offer at Facebook to go optimize ads and trick people into clicking on them and increasing by 6 basis points, how efficient Facebook's inane, completely boring ad network is, go do something meaningful with your life, like working for Marty, because that's more important. There's all this brain drain of incredibly smart people taking $400,000 to work at Facebook on their goddamn ad network, when you could take a little bit of a pay cut, maybe, but work on something you can be proud of. So go do it, everybody. All right, listen, Marty, continued success with Running Tide. Congratulations on getting my pal Chris Sacca on board. That's a real good get for you. He's a tremendous investor and human being as well. So everybody, runningtide.com. And we can't buy anything from you yet, but at some point you should.
No, we're selling oysters. We're selling clams.
Okay.
Yeah.
So go buy some oysters and clams if you can get there. But yeah. I really think, with this, when you start, you can order them online, really?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. 100-count bag of oysters. So everybody go to Running Tide and get some oysters. But you can also, it would be also great if when you do this kelp stuff, if I could, buy 10 stalks as a gift, or this Christmas, if I could give a stalk to everybody and give the gift of carbon sequestration to people, instead of sending them, chocolate bars or whatever, I send them nice chocolate every year, or I could do both. That's kind of a cool gift, kind of give people that gift.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, no, somebody did this thing, and I saw Toby and Elon and everybody did it, where this person was planting trees, and they did a tree planting competition, and everybody just gave $1 million over and over again. It was pretty amazing to watch.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, we'll be, I mean, hopefully we'll be scaling up our efforts across the board, and people can help us out. Be super appreciative.
All right, buy 100 oysters right now. $1.25 an oyster, great deal. At runningtide.com. Thank you so much, Marty, for coming on the pod.
All right, take care. Thank you.